Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Be sure also to drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic. Today, Roman, Chris, and I are diving into our weekly pick'em for Week 10 of the NFL season. How's it going, guys?
I'm good, Drew. Week 9 was decent for our picks. We split on a couple games and we thought it would shake up the standings, but it ended up being a wash. So not what we hoped for, but the standings remain the same.
Yeah, I feel like kind of things have just been kind of staying the same almost every single week lately. Roman, he gets hype either early or late on in the week with a nice win, and then he falls apart with another pick that I pick right. So it's just kind of been staying the same. But me and Drew, we're pacing each other right now. I'm hoping to make a couple picks this week that can get me over the top. But I guess if we don't have anything else to add, we can jump right into the news and notes. A couple QB injuries this week before we get into the regular injuries. We had Kyle Allen. He had a pretty gruesome injury. It didn't end up being quite as bad as we initially thought, but still a tough injury for him with the fractured ankle dislocation as well. He's going to miss the rest of the year, but he'll be back next year, most likely in a backup role somewhere, maybe still in Washington. We'll see about that. We had Stafford. I believe he cleared the concussion protocol, so I think he's going to be all right. He should play this week. Big Ben apparently hurt both of his knees in the same game, which is that's very interesting that he did that. But it's Big Ben. He could probably walk off a torn ACL and still play. So I'm not really too worried about it. He's definitely battled through injuries his entire career and continue to play. But some other key injuries, we got Calais Campbell. He's going to miss a couple weeks. CMC, this is a big one. Coming right off of an absolutely brilliant game. He was unbelievable. A very CMC-like game for both real life and fantasy. 20 yards, picked up a touchdown as well. But one of the last plays of the game, he hurt his upper chest. It didn't look too much, but he's gonna miss this week, I believe, and maybe a little bit more. I think he's week to week right now, but yeah, that's a big deal for him. And then we had David Johnson go down with a concussion. He may not even miss. He may not even miss a week. We'll see about him. He's not really a guy that I think that's had one before that I can think of. So he most likely will be back within at least a week or two at the most. Justin Jackson had the knee injury. This is more fantasy football implications because he got hurt on the first snap of the game, and Roman shaking his head because he had him in his starting lineup confidently. Also made him his start of the week in our fantasy portion. I mean, I thought it was a good pick, and he was almost my pick for start of the week. So luckily he took the bullet for that on the injury. Not really anything you can do about that, but hopefully he can bounce back and get back to health before Eckler comes back. And then Laviska Shenault as well. I believe it's a hamstring injury. He's probably just going to play. He's had these little ticky-tack injuries throughout the entire year, so it's not really anything to worry about. But I'll jump into the injury returns. There's not really that many key injuries besides the CMC one. I think everybody else there will be all right, including him. I think he'll be fine as well. But few offensive players returning from injury. We got Miles Sanders and Joe Mixon. Two guys that are on my fantasy team that I need desperately to come back. We had Mixon with a foot injury, similar to Chris Carson. They both had foot injuries. I could see both of them returning this week. I think Mixon's a little bit more likely because he's coming off the bye and an extra week of rest. Sanders, I think, is very likely to come back. He had I believe, the minor MCL sprain. They never really stated what his actual injury was, but I think he's going to be all right. And then Chubb is also going to be returning from his moderate MCL sprain, I believe is what he had, but he will be back this week. Calvin Ridley, all three of the young guys, Mixon, Carson, and Ridley, all had mid-foot sprain. So curious to see if Ridley will be back. They may just rest him through the bye. So I think these are all interesting names. But Drew, which one of these do you think is the biggest returning star coming back?
Probably Miles Sanders, I would say, just because Philly, they pretty much got the NFC East on lock at the moment, unless they just collapse or if Carson Wentz goes down with an injury. But in terms of their actual playoff implications, they want to maybe win a game or at least be competitive, which a lot of people don't expect them to be. I think Sanders gives them a legit opportunity. We've seen years past where the Eagles, even when they might not have the best regular season, they show up in the playoffs when it matters the most. I think Sanders realistically gives them a shot at that. Nick Chubb too. he was a big part of that Cleveland offense, a big reason why they got off to such a good start, and part of the reason why they've struggled here as of late a little bit. So coming out of the bye, I think that's going to be a huge addition for Cleveland, and same thing with Philadelphia. If Cleveland wants to maybe make some little noise in the playoffs, I think Chubb will be a huge addition for that. The rest of the guys, they're either on good offenses already, like Chris Carson, or they're on teams that don't really have any playoff hopes. Maybe Atlanta with Calvin Ridley. Maybe you can talk yourself into that. But Cincinnati, they're looking for 2021 already.
Yeah, for the Eagles and Browns, they've both had backups that were kind of doing the job decently before these injuries. Boston Scott and Kareem Hunt both holding down the fort for these guys, but they'll both come back and make impacts right away. And I think Chubb is probably the most important one to note because although Hunt was pretty solid, I think they need as many weapons as they can to overcome the OBJ injury. So I think Chubb will have an instant impact right away and probably get more work than Sanders would probably get in their first week back.
And it seemed also that Kareem Hunt, even though maybe he wasn't getting as many touches, he was almost better with Chubb, like kind of as like a change of pace back. Efficient. So I think he was more successful with Chubb. So I think it'll help him out too, even if he's not like the quote unquote lead guy as well. So overall, it's a big win for Cleveland, as you said.
Right, absolutely. I agree. Nick Chubb coming back. I mean, I think he's a top 3 probably pure runner in the league. One of the best running backs. I think he's very underrated, to be honest. He just doesn't catch as many passes now that Hunt's there. But I think Chubb is just a fantastic all-around back, and I really like him a lot. But we'll jump into some of the MVP candidates having big weeks. I mean, I don't really know why he's in this list because he played like crap. But Russell Wilson, I mean, yeah, he's having an MVP season, but he did not have an MVP week last week. He was horrible last week against the Bills. I mean, it doesn't help that he has to score a touchdown every drive because that defense can't stop anybody. But the real MVP of that matchup last week was Josh freaking Allen, baby. He's back. A couple months to start the year, he was awesome. And he had the down stretch. He had a couple games where he played in tough weather, a couple games where he just didn't play very well. Comes back and absolutely dominates, like everybody else has against Seattle, which is on pace. Their defense is on pace to allow 1,000 more passing yards than any other defense has given up in a season. So, I mean, yeah, Josh Allen, he definitely showed that because he went absolutely hamburger on him. So, pretty tough game for the Seahawks in that one. That was my best pick of the week right there, was picking the Bills over the Seahawks. That one felt pretty good to get right. But Patrick Mahomes, I mean, they just forgot how to run the football. I mean, me and Roman are feeling that personally with our Clyde stock. But Drew has been liking it with his Tyreek Hill stock. They've just been airing the ball out. Mahomes is throwing 18 touchdowns a game, 350 passes every single game. So he's just ridiculous. And then Aaron Rodgers, I mean, I think he clearly deserves MVP love, man. I mean, every week I'm seeing 4 touchdowns for him. He doesn't throw interceptions. He doesn't even throw incomplete passes. He's just a great quarterback. Now that he's got Devontae Adams back, how are you going to stop this offense, man? And Aaron Jones, to be honest, they just have been pretty much unguardable on offense throughout the season, besides when they played the Buccaneers, which was kind of embarrassing. But every other week that him and the offense has been ridiculous. So, Roman, who do you think the front runner for MVP is right now?
You know, obviously, besides the down week, I'm still going to say Russell Wilson, just for the fact that he'll have plenty of opportunities to put up much impressive stats. And I don't know if either of you saw this, but Seahawks fans are putting a petition together to fire their defensive coordinator because of how bad their defense has been. So that just goes to show you how much Wilson is integral to that team. And obviously, if they didn't have him, they'd get blown out almost every game.
I think, I'll probably say Russell Wilson too. I don't want to just overreact after every week and say just make my judgment solely based on one week. But Wilson definitely did not look good. And as I kind of talked about last week in our midseason awards predictions, I said that Wilson was kind of running away with the award, but I think definitely Mahomes has really narrowed that gap now, and I think even Aaron Rodgers is still in the conversation.
I do too.
Josh Allen, I think he's a little bit below that just because he had, like you said, Chris, he had a lot of rough weeks there. I think he'll definitely be in MVP conversations for years to come. He's still a really young player, and this is like his maybe first kind of breakout season. I think it's really mainly a 3-horse race between Mahomes, Wilson, and Rodgers. I think they're all really, really close. And any 3 of those guys, depending on how the second half of the season goes, could win. But I also think the guy we're going to be talking about next has a really good chance at MVP too. Wow. We're talking about non-quarterbacks. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I agree. Or no, I actually disagree. I think Mahomes is starting to run away with the award because I think Russell Wilson's had a couple last 3 weeks. He's had a couple down weeks, and I just think Mahomes is just better. I think I think he's gonna win the award for sure.
I go back to the narrative though, because we look at the NBA where LeBron could probably have won the last 10 MVP awards, but he hasn't because of the narrative surrounding him, because we already know he's good and we get kind of fatigued with that. I think we could maybe see the same thing with Mahomes. I think he realistically could win it, but the narrative around Russell Wilson is a lot more favorable than the narrative around Mahomes. So we already know Mahomes is good. He's already won an MVP, so Wilson maybe gets a little more advantage.
Yeah. Before we don't have to talk about it much, but the guy I left off this list, I probably should have been on there over Russell Wilson just because he didn't have a very good week, was Kyler Murray. He's been unbelievable lately, and he definitely would be fifth on my MVP voting out of the entire NFL so far. I think those five quarterbacks would be mine. Ooh, interesting six, but we're gonna go ahead and get into Dalvin Cook, who's been an absolute stud the last week, over 600 yards the past 2 weeks, and I believe 6 touchdowns total as well. He's just been an absolute workhorse running back. He's the reason that the Vikings are anywhere near playoff contention. They have looked better as of late, and he's the absolute only reason why. He's been ridiculous lately, and he's going to continue to do that throughout the season because he's just a really good running back. And minus the injury history, I think he's just one of the most talented backs in the league, and he's proving it now. They just keep feeding him. The difference between him and Madison when he was in was just he's actually making an impact, which is not not tradition for every single running back. If you're an elite running back, you're making like an actual impact on the game. Some running backs, they don't. They're solid, but they don't make an impact on the game. He's not that. So I definitely deserves some MVP consideration. I would not put him insanely high on the list, but he'd be probably in my top 10 somewhere in MVP voting. Drew, what do you think about that? Because it seemed like you wanted to talk about Dalvin pretty bad.
I think he's top 5 at the moment, in my opinion. I think because we look at the Offensive Player of the Year award, which usually goes to the best non-quarterback player in the league. So I think he's probably got that on lock at the moment. And I think he's going to get some MVP love. I think he's right there. He's not as good as Wilson, Mahomes, or Rodgers, but I think he's right there in that Allen Murray range for sure. But the big thing with him is, as you said, Chris, is he could easily get injured next week, and we could be other injuries, and it could
already had the injury
next
too.
week. And he's already had an injury earlier in the week, so it is very realistically happen again. So that is definitely a worry. But if he stays healthy, we've seen the last few weeks he is just insane and has the ability to be the best non-quarterback offensive weapon in the league for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. Cook has that offensive player on the year locked down for sure, and I think that he's making Minnesota look way better than their first couple of games. They're probably the best 3-5 team out there. So do they have a chance at the playoffs? Possibly. We'll have to see. But if they can get a full rest of the season with Cook, they definitely have a shot.
Yeah, I agree with that. They have to win. I mean, this week it might be their biggest game of the year. I mean, if they lose this one, it's over against Chicago. And in division, Chicago's playing pretty bad. That's going to be an interesting game. That might actually be my game of the week, to be honest. I think there's a lot of playoff implications for the winner of this game.
Yeah.
We'll jump into the last thing before we get into the pick 'em, which I'm very excited to do. I think it's going to be it's a good slate. It's going to be pretty fun. But the Miami Dolphins Tua, he's a really good quarterback, man. That's as simple as it is. He's already proven that he's a solid quarterback in this league. Was able to go toe to toe. Maybe didn't put up the craziest numbers, but was able to go wire to wire with Kyler Murray and lead this offense down the field with points almost every single drive of that game, which was a really fun game. Actually, I was expecting Arizona maybe not to run away with it, but to win by a touchdown, maybe a touchdown and a field goal around there. But that's not what happened, man. I think the Dolphins are for real. Their defense they gave up a lot of points, but they had a couple nice stops throughout that game and were able to hold Arizona to that long field goal attempt that ended up coming up just short. Could have tied the game up, but did not. So are the Dolphins for real, Roman? What do you think?
I think it's maybe a little bit too early to say. I'd like to see a couple more weeks of Tua. I'm not really going to say that he outplayed Kyler Murray. I'll leave that up to you two to decide that. But they definitely look good. They have great coaching, great weapons. If their season ended today, they just sneak in as the 7th seed. So obviously they'll be in the hunt or in contention the rest of the season. and hopefully just you hope Tua gets better each week and propels the Dolphins to something that we probably never expected them to do, which is a playoff berth.
I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, so I guess I might fall in the pretenders category. But I do think they're going to be right there. I'm looking at the teams right now. Currently, they are in the playoffs right now as the 7th seed. But I look at the Browns, I look at the Colts, who are currently below them. I think both of those teams will sneak in over the Raiders and the Dolphins. But I think the Dolphins will be right there in the hunt because when you look at the teams below them, even farther down, you have the Broncos, Patriots, Bengals, Chargers, Texans, Jaguars, and obviously the Jets. I think they're easily better than all those teams. And as you guys have already mentioned, I really like their defense. Tua showed some serious signs. There's been some rumors that apparently Tua, they want to start Tua just because they thought that they might spend one, because they have like 3 or 4 first-round picks in this year's upcoming draft. They wanted to see what Tua looked like because they thought about maybe drafting a different quarterback and then trading off of Tua into next season. So that's pretty insane. And but I think Tua's proved that as long as he can stay healthy, those are also some injury concerns surrounding him, but I think he's proved that he is the long-term option in Miami, which then just opens up Miami to a whole bunch of different options. They think they have Houston's first-round pick, which is probably going to be top 5 with how bad they've been. If Tua is their quarterback of the future, they already have a solid playoff caliber roster. They could be a championship contender if those draft picks fall right and maybe they attract some free agents as early as next season, which is really exciting for a team that 16 months ago we were talking about as maybe the worst ever. So things are looking really good for Miami for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you said. I think they're right there on the brink of contention. I mean, I think they're going to be a playoff contender, I guess you could say, but also they're a legitimate championship contender. Next year, I could absolutely see them both in this division and being like a second or third week playoff team or something. I could absolutely see them getting out of the wild card round, maybe even getting to the AFC championship at least, because I think this roster, if they make a couple big moves and make a nice draft pick or two, I think they're actually that close to being good, because I mean they have drafted the offensive lineman, they have their quarterback. Maybe they could use a better running back. I mean, even Gaskin's been pretty serviceable. A weapon on the outside, I think, and maybe a linebacker or something is basically all they really need. Because they have a really solid secondary. They got a couple decent pass rushers. They could maybe use another one of those as well. But I think this is a team that's really a few spots away from contending. It's crazy. I agree that they were so bad, and now they're actually like a legitimate possible contender and one of the most exciting teams to be a fan of in the league now. But we can go ahead and jump into the pick 'em now, Drew, if you're ready.
Yeah, I think in the AFC East, just to kind of finish off that point, it's going to be a really good division to follow here because Buffalo's good. Miami's going to be good for a while.
The Jets are really good.
Jets are so good. Yeah. I don't know. If they get Trevor Lawrence, they'll be an interesting team too. I think that weirdly enough, the Pats are slowly becoming maybe the least interesting team.
They are.
And they could, as great as they were for 2 decades, they could be just as bad for the next decade or so.
Yeah, we can't forget that the Pats did lose a lot of those defensive players to opt out, so like they can come back next season and look completely different.
Yeah,
maybe with a new quarterback, we'll see. But I don't think this is necessarily the last of Bill Belichick in the playoffs.
Yeah, they could get a high pick too and draft, maybe not get Trevor Lawrence, but maybe get a Justin Fields.
Trey Lance.
Yeah, one of those kind of guys in the draft too, or attract a free agent, or maybe Cam Newton still has something left in the tank. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see. But we'll jump into the pick'em now. You talked about it earlier, Chris. The Minnesota-Chicago game has huge implications for the NFC North and the NFC playoff picture, but the Thursday night game has massive implications for the AFC South. Division winner. We just mentioned it a second ago. The Colts are right there in the wild card hunt, but they're currently out of it behind the Dolphins and the Raiders, so they really need this win. So it's good. They're both coming off the Colts are coming off a bad loss to the Ravens. Titans are coming off a solid yet ugly win against the Bears. So let's see. Chris, how about you start us off here? Colts or Titans?
Yeah, I think that this is one of maybe the best Thursday night football game of the year. I'm expecting this to be a really good game. I mean, these are 2 good teams. Tennessee coming off the win, but I didn't think they looked that great against the Bears. Their defense did look good, but their offense I didn't think looked that impressive. The Colts I actually think played a better game than the actual than the loss show, because they had that BS pick to Marcus Peters. I absolutely do not think he caught at all, because I don't know. Apparently, I don't know what a catch is, because that's not a catch. I'm going with Indianapolis this game. I think they're pissed about that. I think they're going to win this game, but I think it's going to be a really good game, so I could easily be wrong too. So I think it's going to be decided by a field goal or a touchdown late in the game.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris, when you said that Indianapolis played very well despite the loss. And I agree also that Tennessee had a very ugly win, which I do think Tennessee will win in a very ugly fashion this week as well. Derrick Henry kind of hasn't had his best stretch of games. I think that changes this week, even though it's a very tough defense. And I think Tennessee gets the win out quick.
I am right there in agreement with you, Roman. I think it's gonna be a really good game. We've had a couple stinkers on Thursday night here recently. The last really good game, maybe I'm just forgetting, but I think it was Giants Eagles. That was really ugly, but that was decent, I guess. Had some playoff implications, but this is a really good game. Coming off the absolute brutal game from last week, San Francisco Green Bay. It's a really good Thursday night game. But I think I just like Tennessee a little bit more. Indianapolis, I know I was super high on them early in the year, and I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't know. There's something about the team that I just don't love. Maybe I'm just biased because Jonathan Taylor's on my fantasy team, and he's just been absolute trash for me since I traded for him. But whatever. Anyway, we got Washington football team taking on the Detroit Lions. Two teams coming off some pretty brutal losses. Washington was pretty close, but it was to the Giants. So anytime you lose to the Giants, it's kind of embarrassing. And the Lions just got absolutely run over by Dalvin Cook and the Vikings last week. So two teams in desperate need of a get-right game. Not a whole lot of playoff implications here, more than likely, unless the Lions pull off some miracle run. But we'll see. Roman, who do you got in this game?
Yeah, I would just like to say that obviously we expect Alex Smith to start this game. It'll be his first week kind of preparing as the starter going into this game. And I think that doesn't change the outcome for me. I think Detroit's going to win. They need to break their home losing streak, and I think they're going to do that. Hopefully they have like their weapons step up because it was not a good game last week for them. Stafford should be back, I believe, because he passed concussion protocol. So I think that just gives them an automatic advantage against a weak team.
Oh man, this is a brutal game to pick. You know what? I'm gonna pick Washington. I don't really care. I don't think Kenny G's gonna play this week. I think that's the key for me because they need a weapon to stretch the field. I think their Stafford played really bad last week. Washington's pass defense this year is number one so far in allowing at least fantasy points to game to wide receivers, and they're easily one of the better secondaries in the league, at least on paper, I guess. Also, the defensive line's been good too. Chase Young, he's a beast. I think Detroit struggles to do anything offensively this game, and their defense is worse too. So I'm gonna go Washington here in an upset.
Yeah, I like the pick, Chris. I respect the pick, but I mean, I got to go with the Lions. I look at their schedule, and I didn't really see too many more games where I'd probably pick them to win. So I'm going to go with this one. It's going to be an ugly game. It's going to be low scoring.
Not excited for this game at all.
Yeah, if you're not a Lions or Washington football team fan, you're probably not watching this game. But I could see either or. I could see Washington just absolutely dominating defensively, as you said, Chris. Stafford
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
But Stafford was coming off being placed on the COVID list. Got really no practice time last week against a good team in Minnesota. So I don't know. It's going to be an ugly game. But I think Detroit. I don't know when are they going to win at home if they don't win this game, right? It's never going to happen. So you got to win this game.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it, man. I mean, I had full intentions of picking Detroit, but for the video, I'm going to pick Washington this one because I'm going to keep it on brand to pick against the Lions yet again, and I'll probably be wrong, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's realistic. It's respectable. Washington could definitely come out on top, but we'll go to the next game. Houston. Just not a good team overall. Just not great. They did get a victory last week, but I just don't like them at all. They're not good. They got some weapons offensively, but they're just not a good team. Sorry, Roman. I know you like Houston, but I just don't like them.
Their defense is atrocious.
Yes. And then we got the Browns coming out of the bye. They're right in that playoff hunt, currently on the outside looking in, but this is a good game coming out of the bye that can help their playoff chances for sure. So, Chris, you got the Browns or the Texans?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Browns in this one. I do think this is going to be a pretty good game because I think Deshaun Watson will keep this close. I just like Nick Chubb returning, and I think that's a big deal. Houston's run defense can't stop anybody. I think they're gonna pull out a win, but I think it could be a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think it'll be another weather impacted game like the Browns game 2 weeks ago. They had snow. I think it'll rain. I think according to the weather, it'll rain.
They're definitely the better team for that.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna go with the Houston because they came off a good win, and I think they have the weapons to win against a team that who knows what Chubb will really look like coming out of his injury and the bye. So they could easily the Browns could easily blow out the Texans, but I think Houston has a good job.
Well, I believe Baker Mayfield got activated earlier today before we recorded this episode.
Yeah, he's playing.
I think the Browns, yeah. If it's a bad weather game, if it's a ground and pound game, I know the Browns lost that game a few weeks ago to the Raiders in very similar circumstances, but they didn't have Nick Chubb. As Chris said, Nick Chubb is the definition of a ground and pound running back. I think he goes off this game. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be a good kind of secondary option, and I think Cleveland wins this game pretty decidedly. I know you love Houston, and I know this is like we talked about Chris's bid against the Lions. Your bid's all for Houston since our preview episodes, but they're not a good team. They're just not a good team. It's not happening. But anyway, jumping to the next game here: Jacksonville versus Green Bay. Jake Luton or Luton, however you pronounce his last name. He actually looked pretty good there. I know Chris has already been putting Green Bay down, but he looked decent against Houston. But as I said, Houston's not a good football team. Green Bay looked amazing against San Francisco, just absolutely walked all over them. So as Chris already put, Green Bay's got the victory. Roman, are you following suit? I assume so.
Yeah, Jake Luton was pretty good, but I think he'll run into a wall this game.
Yeah, I also got Green Bay.
Luton looked all right. He looked all right. I mean, he kind of just looked like healthy Gardner Minshew to me in terms of like level of quarterback. Like he's not going to win very many games, but at least he can kind of keep it close. I think it's going to be very different. I mean, they were playing a 2 or 3 win Houston Texans team, and they're a 1-win team. So that was an irrelevant game last week. I think this is a relevant game because I think Green Bay dominates Jacksonville.
Yeah. Green Bay, they just looked so good against San Francisco on Thursday Night Football last week, and I think Jacksonville is top 3 worst teams in the NFL at the moment, so Green Bay is going to walk all over them. Not too much to add. Oh, sorry, Roman.
Unlike the Browns, the Packers actually get better when the weather gets colder, so I think they're going to win this one pretty handily.
I don't know where all this Brown slander is coming from, but okay. Anyway, jumping into the Eagles-Giants game. This has got some decent playoff implications, I would say. The Giants coming off a nice victory against Washington, the only team they've beaten this year, but they beat them twice, so they got 2 wins. Eagles coming out of the bye. They are probably the best team in the NFC East, but if they lose this game, the Giants pull out a victory. The Giants should have won against them on Thursday Night Football just a few weeks ago, so it should be a good game. Philadelphia doesn't blow people out too often, so I will throw it to Roman. Who you got here, Eagles or Giants?
Miles Sanders, if you're watching this, I need you to score 4 touchdowns for me. Thank you. I'm going to go with Philly.
All right, man. I mean, I'm also going to go with Philly, and I also have Miles Sanders. I'm just hoping he stays healthy, to be honest, man. That's all I want this week. I'm not asking for much. Miles, if you're hearing this, man, assuming you're not, just stay healthy. That's all I'm asking for, man. I need that from you. But I think he actually, in all seriousness, makes the difference in this game. I actually think this would be a tougher decision for me, maybe picking the Giants even to win. I think he is that good. I think he's one of those rare running backs that actually makes a big impact in the victory because he's got that big play potential. He's great out of the backfield as well. So I think that's the difference in this one.
I think the Eagles win. The Giants, they've showed some things here.
Yeah,
they've looked pretty good. They almost beat Tampa Bay, almost beat Philadelphia a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, beat Washington last week. Yeah. Daniel Jones, he does not look great. And if they had a better quarterback a little bit, and if Barkley was healthy, I think this would be a legit playoff team. I know we're talking about Miami as a young up-and-coming team, lots of good positive vibes around them, but I think the Giants, they could be a sneaky playoff contender.
Their defense is actually pretty good.
As early as next season, I think. I'm just not a Daniel Jones believer. I don't like him. So maybe if they try to get a different quarterback, whether through the draft, they're going to have a relatively high draft pick next year, or maybe through free agency. But as we've seen in the past with teams like Chicago, if they take a quarterback with a high pick, they're never going to give up on him, even if it's not working. So who knows? Maybe Jones is still young. Maybe he pulls a Josh Allen and goes from not being great to being really, really good. Well, who knows? We'll see. But next up, we got the Bengals and the Steelers, and AFC North rivalry game, kind of. The Bengals coming out of the bye, coming off a monster win a couple weeks ago against the Titans. Very big upset win. Joe Burrow looks really good. Their offense looks pretty good outside the offensive line. Defense is all right, I guess. Still not a strong suit. The Steelers coming off a game they should have lost last week, in all honesty, against Garrett Gilbert of all people, and the just injury-riddled Dallas Cowboys, both offensive and defensively. Not a whole lot I liked from that game, even even though they did get the victory, remain the only undefeated team in the NFL. But I think this should be a close enough game. But I'm interested to see, Chris, what do you think? Who's going to win, Bengals or Steelers?
I'm going to go with the Steelers in this one, but I agree. I think this is going to be a good game. It's a game that I would love to pick Cincinnati to win if there was no huge implications in our pick 'em. Maybe if I was up by a lot of games or something, I would go with Cincinnati just because I think they do have a chance to make a big upset in this one. But I'm going to go with Pittsburgh in this one just because, I mean, I think they played bad last week. I think they'll bounce back. This could be a get right game for them against this mediocre to bad Cincinnati defense. I think Joe Burrow has a pretty good game and proves that he can be good against good defenses.
Yeah, I would love to see Cincinnati beat Pittsburgh, but I think Pittsburgh has a much better game. They played down to the Cowboys level last week. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to stay undefeated and get a win. I think it'll still be a close game, though.
I started off the show saying how I don't like going all in after 1 week or 2 weeks in Cincinnati's case, but I'm doing it, baby. I'm going Cincinnati with this one. Cincinnati feels like I like the way their trajectory is, in Pittsburgh, I feel like they are the luckiest undefeated team. I mean,
they are.
Their games that they're down to the wire more often than not, aside from when they just absolutely destroyed the Browns. So maybe the same thing happens here. But Joe Burrow, I like him, and I don't think he's not going to let him get blown out. They're going to be in this game. Roethlisberger is currently on the COVID list. He's most likely going to be activated before the game. But we saw last week with the Lions. What?
He's going to miss a lot. All
practices. That's what I was going to say. We saw last week with Stafford for the Lions. That really limited his play, and he didn't play well. So I think Roethlisberger also he's banged up a little bit. We've seen in the past it doesn't really limit him, but I'm worried on that end. Pittsburgh just seems so lucky, and I think their luck runs out this week, and they lose in a big upset to the Bengals. But I've been pretty chalky the last few weeks. I wanted to kind of go off the wall a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. I like the pick, man. It's a ballsy pick. It could pay off. I like Cincinnati this week, though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game for sure. I really like what I've seen from Joe Burrow. As I said on previous episodes, I think he might be the best quarterback in that division already in his rookie year. But that's kind of hot take when Lamar Jackson's also in that division. But next up, we got Buccaneers and the Panthers. The Panthers, I mean, they were amazing, got to a great start, and have kind of sputtered here down the stretch. Looked good against Kansas City last week, but ultimately fell short. That cannot be said for Tampa Bay, who looked absolutely awful. Maybe the worst performance I've seen from a good football, quote unquote, good football team in prime time in a very, very long time. They did not show up at all against New Orleans. And it was the quote-unquote unveiling of their new offense with Antonio Brown, and they looked absolutely atrocious. So, Roman, who you got in this one?
Yeah, I honestly can't even explain what happened last week. That was just so mind-boggling that they lost by so much. But I'm going to go with Tampa in a get-right game because they desperately need it. And if they lose to Carolina, I don't think the division is going to be in their hands anytime soon. So they need this game, and Brady will have a much better performance as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything Roman says. We don't agree much, but this is definitely something we do agree on. I think they will win this game. I think it could be a pretty good game, and I definitely think Carolina has a chance to win, but I agree. I think this is a get-right game for Tampa Bay.
I agree. Carolina, it really stinks because I know we were all drinking the Panthers Kool-Aid here a few weeks ago, and now they just keep losing games. They look really promising. I think they're going to be a good team next year. There might be a little not as far along the rebuilding path as maybe a Dolphins, but it'd still be interesting to see how good they are next year. But it's very unfortunate because this was a team that a lot of us were like, they could be a dark horse playoff team, but they've just not looked great. So I think Tampa Bay, as bad as they looked last week, I think this is the perfect game to get right, get Antonio Brown a little more acclimated to the offense, and hopefully come out with a victory. But next up, we got an AFC West rivalry game between the Broncos and the Raiders. Broncos came up just short despite a monster game by Jerry Jeudy against the Atlanta Falcons. And the Raiders somehow pulled off a victory against the perennial chokers in the Los Angeles Chargers, which we'll get to in the next matchup. But let's see, Roman, do you like the Broncos or the Raiders in this one?
I'm giving a slight edge to the Raiders this game. They both showed good moment on offense last week. But I think, when we look at the Raiders wins, Josh Jacobs has a good game. I think in order to win this week, he will have to have another monster game, which he does. Denver, we all thought would, put some numbers on offense against the weak Falcons D, and they didn't really do that. They would have won if they did. So I'm gonna go with Vegas.
Yeah, Drew Lock played really well in the fourth quarter, but the first three he played bad. I don't think against a team that can run the football, Denver's run defense hasn't been great lately. I think Josh Jacobs has a solid game. I think he can get in the end zone maybe once or twice. Derek Carr, as much as apparently Roman hates him, which I found out pretty recently, I think he's been playing excellent football. I think he continues that this week. His route to try to lead this team to the playoffs. They're in the hunt right now. I think this is a team that could end up making the playoffs potentially.
Yeah, they currently hold the sixth seed in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
they're right there, man. I think this is a team that unlike I mean the Dolphins could end up making it, but I think this is a team that has the recipe to make it. You know.
Yeah, and I liked what I saw with Derek Carr too. Sometimes he's been hesitant in the past to throw the deep ball, but he was throwing a lot of deep balls there against the Chargers and connecting on a lot of them. So I'm kind of in the middle between you guys. I'm not as high on him as Chris is, but I'm not as low on him as Roman is. I think he's just a solid quarterback, but Derek Carr is definitely capable of leading this team to the playoffs because he's done it before. He did it a few years ago, and they're like I said at the top, they're going to be in that hunt for those last two seeds with the Dolphins, the Browns, and the Colts. It's going to be fun to watch that race. And the Broncos, they're going to be another team that has a lot to look forward to in 2021. I think they're going to be solid in the years to come. But next up, we got another two teams who are going to be really solid here, hopefully, in the years to come. The Chargers, as I mentioned with the last matchup between the Broncos and the Raiders, the Chargers choked again. I mean, this is just, as I mentioned last week, they are the most disappointing team in the NFL because they could realistically be in that playoff hunt in the AFC. They have the talent. Justin Herbert's is playing like the rookie of the year. I know I like Joe Burrow a little bit more, but he's playing really, really well at a really high level. And it's just really unfortunate because they just cannot close games. And the same thing happened last week against the Raiders. And the Dolphins, we already talked. I'm not going to go too in detail with them because we already talked about them at length earlier, but they're right there in the playoff hunt. So, Chris, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting game on the docket for us. I'm going to go with the Dolphins just because the fact that the Chargers just continually just blow these leads, man. I think this is another game where that could happen, but I actually think the Chargers defense has been even more disappointing. They've been getting absolutely torched lately. They're supposed to be some good defense, but this is since Herbert took over, maybe it's a little bit of an implication on the offense being better as well. Their defense is getting absolutely shredded, both on the ground and through the air. I think the Dolphins and Tua have a chance, especially I think Joey Bosa may miss the game as well. So that I think he was potentially banged up. I don't know for sure what's going on with him, but I think the Dolphins have a good chance to win this game.
Yeah, to me, this is my game of the week. I'm really excited to see these young rookies battle it out. I feel really bad for Herbert because he always puts up good numbers. He always gets his team in position to win, and then it just falls apart within the last minute. I thought I'd be the only one going with Miami this week, and I'm still going to pick them because I like what I see with Tua, and I hope he puts up the same kind of performance as he has the past couple of weeks. This will go down to the wire for sure, but I think Miami edges it out.
Yeah, we're all going to be going with Miami in this one because I really like what I seen from Miami, and it sucks because I like the Chargers. I really like that team, but
Me too.
You mentioned it there, Roman, where Herbert puts up these monster numbers and just falls just short. It's very similar to another quarterback named Phillip Rivers, who was also happened to be on the Chargers, put up crazy numbers, but just always fell short in the big games, in the playoff games, all that stuff. So maybe there's something in the water there in San Diego. Now it's Los Angeles. Previously was San Diego. But yeah, hopefully they get this thing turned around because I think the Chargers. I love their uniforms too. They're just a fun team to watch, and I really want them to be good. So I want
they're going with their throwback unis this week, so they're gonna channel in the old time Dolphins.
those dark blue ones they had on last week where like the lightning bolt was also dark blue. I didn't really know how I felt about those originally, but
They're
then
sick.
on the field I was like, these look awesome. So I want them to be good. I really do, and hopefully 2021 they have a little bit better luck. As great of a guy as Anthony Lynn is, I think it starts there, and hopefully they bring in a new head coach to maybe right some of these late game issues that have sprung up here, not just this season but previous seasons as well. So next up, we got the Bills and the Cardinals. The Bills coming off a huge win. Josh Allen's really, really good against the Seattle Seahawks. Pretty convincing as well. And the Cardinals coming off a disappointing loss to the Dolphins because Zane Gonzalez he just forgot how to kick, and he just kicked just a little, not strong enough. So that was unfortunate. But two teams, both really good, both in the playoff hunt at the moment. So Roman, do you like the Bills or the Cardinals in this one?
Recency bias is making me pick Buffalo, so I'm gonna pick Buffalo. But I very well know this is gonna be a game that I could possibly get burned on because Arizona was not at their best last week, and I think they're gonna make it a much more competitive game. They do have a really good chance of winning, but I'm gonna give the edge to Buffalo.
And I'm also going with Buffalo in this one. I think the recipe is very similar to the game against Seattle. I think all they need is a turnover or two with the way Josh Allen played last week. I don't think Arizona's defense is that much better than Seattle's. I know their pass defense is a little bit better, but I believe Buffalo has another big game this week. I think Josh Allen takes over. He's been kind of dominant against that division so far. I mean, he beat the Rams, he beat the Seahawks. I mean, this is 3 of 4, and then he's got San Fran in a couple weeks too. He could sweep the best division in football, which would be, in my opinion, a big time statement and a reason why Buffalo is still a legitimate playoff contender. I think their defense looks a little better. I think this is a potential game they can win.
Yeah, I'm not an Arizona believer at all. I think they're probably going to make the playoffs just because the bottom half of the NFC isn't great. But I just don't like Arizona that much for whatever reason. I just don't
I
believe in them.
love Arizona, man.
And I really believe in this Buffalo team, though. I think they could win a playoff game. They almost won one last year. I think they could realistically win one this year as well. And I think they get a little closer to that with a big win against the Cardinals, coming off an already even bigger win against the Seahawks last week. But speaking of the Seahawks, they're our next matchup here. They're taking on the Los Angeles Rams, who are coming out of the bye. So, Chris, do you think the Seahawks get right, or do you think the Rams get a big, much-needed win here against the NFC West foe?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Seattle in this one. I feel the exact same way as Drew does about Arizona about the Rams. I think this is a fraudly team. They're good, but I don't think they're great. I think Jared Goff really holds them back. I think he's a terrible quarterback, one of the worst in the league, and he's gonna prove it. Even against this ridiculously good pass defense, he may have some good numbers, but I think he's gonna be the reason they don't get the job. I think Russell Wilson, he's pissed. He doesn't have 4 turnovers in very many even seasons. I feel like this is a guy that is allergic to turning the ball over, but he had a ton last week and was the reason that they weren't able to keep pace with the Buffalo Bills for very long in that game. But yeah, give me the Seahawks in this one.
Yeah, I don't pick against the Rams very often, but this is going to be one of those times. I don't think Russell Wilson has a good taste in his mouth after that last game where he was just not himself at all. And although this is going to be a game very high scoring, a lot of great fantasy options, as I'm sure we'll get into later, Seattle, I think, is going to get the win. Just to touch on your point, though, about the Rams, I don't think they're frauds as much as the other teams in the league, but the Rams will always contend till the last week and maybe even sneak in the playoffs. That's all I got to say.
We're going too chalk here, so I'm going to shake things up here. Give me the Rams. Give me the Rams in this one. I mean, they got a good defense. I think they could limit Seattle enough. And as we've seen last week, I don't think the Rams are as good of an offense as Buffalo for sure. But they do have a really good running attack. I don't think Jared Goff's as bad as Chris you tend to think he is. I think he's just a league average quarterback. That got him to the Super Bowl a few years ago. So I think that's going to get a win against the Seahawks here. And I think it might be time to panic in Seattle a little bit because Russell Wilson, he can't be playing, at just amazing superstar MVP level every game, every moment of every game, every snap of every game. And I think he's going to come a little short again against frankly, a better defense in the Rams than he faced last week against Buffalo. So I think he's going to turn the ball over a few more times, and I think the Rams are going to sneak out a victory here in this one. But we'll jump into the next one here. Two teams on completely different trajectories. San Francisco, their injuries. We already mentioned earlier, Green Bay absolutely destroyed them in Thursday Night Football. But then the Saints absolutely destroyed the Buccaneers on that was on Sunday Night Football. San Francisco lost on Thursday Night Football, excuse me. And then these Saints, though, they're looking really, really good after a kind of a disappointing start to their year. So I think it's pretty easy who's going to win. Roman already put it down. Chris, do you agree?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I think this isn't a very chalk game, and I'm going to pick it. I don't think San Fran is very good, especially without Jimmy G and George Kittle, and the fact that every running back and defensive player on the team is also injured. And they have Deebo Samuel back, so I guess that will be nice, but it doesn't matter, man. I mean, New Orleans defense is playing out of their minds right now. Drew Brees has been his normal, efficient 4-yard dump offs. He's been great at it, and then slant man Michael Thomas is back as well. I mean, I know he didn't have a big game, but he definitely opens up the offense a little bit more at least.
I will say, though, that New Orleans do have their fair share of concerns, and they have to fix before the playoffs because they don't blow out teams very often, which is why one of the reasons I was shocked because of last week's game. But I do think they're going to have their problems in the playoffs because that's been their big thing, not making it past the wild card round. So I don't think
Yep,
last week's game changes anything for me, but they still have to prove they're going to be a team that can compete in the few other past weekends of the playoffs.
agreed.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. New Orleans is really good, and San Francisco, I think I was the first one that was out on them because of all their injuries, but I think it's panic time there. Hopefully, they can get some new blood, some better injury luck next year because I still think they're a Super Bowl contending team when healthy. But next up, we got another game that's probably relatively easy to predict. Baltimore took care of business against the Colts last week. The Patriots, I guess, took care of business against the Jets, but the Jets kind of the Jets just choked, quite frankly, and they did not deserve to win that game. So it's probably another easy game to predict, but no one's putting Baltimore automatically in. So I'm interested to see, Chris, what do you think? And there we go on cue.
Yep, I don't really have much to say about this one. I actually do think its potential of this game is low scoring, so I guess kind of you can call it in quotes close. But I don't think it's going to be a two-score game. I think it's going to be kind of a. I'm personally not that excited for this game because Baltimore's offenses look trash. I mean, and then New England just doesn't look like a football team anymore. The defense is out there giving up 35 points to the worst offense in football. And then, I mean, their offense looked good last week, but it really has looked horrible since week one. So I think it's over for Newton. I think the playoffs, there's no shot. I think they should be shooting for a higher pick rather than going for the playoffs now. And I think this is where it starts.
Yeah, the only reason I could think that New England can stay in this game is because Lamar Jackson, because he's not been impressive whatsoever. He didn't even
Right.
have a great game last week. He kind of had a rushing touchdown to salvage his fantasy day at least, but not really. I'm not really excited to watch him as we were last year, and
No.
it could go either way. But I would hope that Baltimore gets the win.
Yeah, I got enough of New England last week in prime time. I don't know why they have to be in prime time again this week. So hopefully it's a quick game. It has potential for a lot of running, a lot of slow pace. So that might not be the case, but who knows? Next up, though, we got a really big game. We kind of let it off, a big game, a lot of NFC North Division, NFC wildcard implications here. We got the Vikings. Again, kind of two teams in two different trajectories. The Vikings are improving a lot, coming off a big win against the Lions, while the Bears just continue to lose, continue to fall flat on their face after Chris and all the other Chicago fans were drinking all the Bears Kool-Aid earlier on in the year. So I guess, Chris, you can start off with this one. Do you think the Bears get back on track, or do you think the Vikings make maybe a bigger push towards the playoffs a little bit?
Yeah, this is my game of the week, not because I think it's going to be the best, like in terms of best watching game, but I think it has the biggest implications in this entire this entire slate. But I'm going to go with Minnesota in this one. I think it is going to be a good game. But Nick Foles has looked. I mean, he looked. I guess the stats were all right last week, but he really didn't do much till the fourth quarter. They couldn't run the ball. Their defense looked a little bit. It wasn't great against the aerial assault. Did pretty good against the run. So, I mean, Dalvin Cook, if they can stop him, they definitely have a chance to win this game. But I am going to take Minnesota because of how good Cook has been lately.
Yeah, I can't talk being a Lions fan, but I'm just loving the Bears imploding on themselves, and I think Cook is going to go into Chicago and have another monster game. I don't care if they have Khalil Mack or not. With Nick Foles as your quarterback, you don't have a high ceiling. The floor isn't even that high either. So Minnesota is going to win this game very convincingly, I believe, and give them a nice push and maybe get them back into contention.
It's gonna be a close game because Kirk Cousins doesn't deliver in prime time, so it's gonna be a close game.
That's true.
I expect not a huge game by him. Minnesota has also been known to just fall flat on their face, but I think Chicago is gonna fall a little bit harder flat on their face and not play well. I think it's gonna be a close game, but ultimately Dalvin Cook is Dalvin Cook. If he gets injured, which is definitely has potential to against a good defense in Chicago, that's going to be a big blow, obviously. But I think Minnesota gets the job done, and I think they are a dark horse playoff contender now, officially. If they win this game, a legit shot there at that 7th seed, knocking off an Arizona or a Rams. But we'll have to wait and see because I thought they were a good team headed into the year, got off to a terrible start, but they're looking really good here as of late. But yeah, that's it for the pick. And we disagreed a little bit more, but there's also a lot of chalk games here this week. I kind of missed. So
I would hope next week we get some more changes in the standings. I expect there to be some. I'm interested to see who comes out on top between Chris and Drew throughout the season because they've always been neck and neck. And if things can fall my way, I'll be right there with you guys.
Yeah, I'll have to wait and see. We'll have to watch that Detroit Washington game now because there's a lot of standings implications in that game as well,
Yeah,
I guess. But
yeah, you sure are.
we'll start off jumping now to the fantasy picks of the week. Chris, how about you start us off here with your first pick?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just recap my last week. I had Marvin Jones, who had the pretty average week. Wasn't spectacular, but did get in the end zone. So he helped your fantasy team with about 10 points, 12 points in PPR. But Jerry Judy, baby, what a pick. That was my best pick of the year, maybe the best pick of the year. He had over 25 PPR points. He was an absolute monster. And, not a chalk player. This is a guy I had to put in my lineup because I had like 18 guys on bye, and it worked out pretty well. So, I mean, a guy that I'm willing to start again this week. He's not in my starts of the week, but definitely a guy I'd be willing to start this week yet again against the soft Raiders pass defense. But I'll go ahead and get into my first pick. It's a running back duo, and it is Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick. I'm going to both, and I'm assuming everybody else had them too. But against Detroit. 32nd against running backs. J.D. McKissick, I would only be willing to start him in a full PPR format, but he had 14 targets last week against the Alex Smith-led offense. He is going to get peppered with targets, and Antonio Gibson has looked good on the ground. He also is a good pass catcher. I'd be willing to start him as an RB2 or a flex option. Both options, honestly, are probably low-end to mid-end RB2s, but definitely guys I would be willing to start. I think they both find over double-digit points in whatever format you need them to. Besides JD, and I would not start him in standard, but half or full, I think he'll get over 10.
That was a very obscure pick by you, and I feel like you only did that despite the Lions. That wasn't my pick at all. Gibson I can understand, but J.D. McKissick I think that's a bit of a stretch. So I hope you're I hope you're happy with those picks.
I'm assuming you had both of them down on your list. I mean, McKissick had 17 PPR points last week. I'd be willing to absolutely be willing to start him yet again against an even worse pass defense. I mean, or at least running back defense against pass. I mean, Detroit just can't stop any running back. They average around 35 fantasy points. I mean, if you break that up, even if Washington gets around 30, I mean, there's plenty of room for guys to go over 15 full PPR points, in my opinion.
Yeah, I 100% agree because I did have him down and he was my first pick because Detroit is currently the worst team against the run for fantasy running backs. So, yeah, I'm pretty disappointed because I'm starting him this week in my league, and I think he's going to have a big week. And I didn't have McKissick, but you make great points as well. So, had to call a little bit of an audible here and find a new pick. But, yeah, overall, good pick, Chris. But, Roman, how about you jump into yours?
Yeah, I'll recap my picks last week as well. I went with the duo of Cooks and Fuller, who both had great games, both got in the end zone. Fuller got more work, and Cooks got a lucky screen that he ran for 50 yards and a touchdown. So I won't complain with that. And then obviously Chris said at the top, Justin Jackson was a big failure. Was primed for a great game, then got hurt on the first drive. So that did not work out for
me. Not really
him.
your fault. Nothing you can do about that.
No, really wasn't.
I thought he was going to have a good game too. He was one of my picks as well that you kind of stole from me. So unfortunate there, but let's hear your first pick this week. I'm excited.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to steal another person's pick today. It's Robert Woods. Great game against the Seahawks. I'm very excited to see him play. He's on my starting lineup as well, so I'm very excited for him against the Seahawks, who give up the most points to the wide receiver position. Just talk about the fantasy playoffs in general. Woods plays the Seahawks in the championship week, so it's very helpful for him. But this game is going to get a little bit of a taste to see what he can do against a very porous defense.
Yeah, I did not have Robert Woods, but it was definitely a guy I considered probably a really good start of the week. I think it's a very low risk start of the week. I'm not saying you went chalk, but because Wood is in an absolute must start, but he is this week against the very lowly Seattle defense. I think you could go with Cooper Kupp as well, so I hope I didn't steal anybody by saying that as well. I think Cooper Kupp is a very good start, too.
I 100% agree with you, Chris, because my first start of the week, which was originally my second start of the week, was Cooper Kupp against the Seattle Seahawks. I'm just going to stick with it because that technically wasn't Roman's pick, so I'm still going with it.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, he coming off a monster week there before the bye. And he got off to a really slow start, but he's kind of turned it around here as of late. I got the Rams winning their game, so I think Cooper Kupp's going to be a big part of that, and I think he's going to have a good fantasy game as well to go along with that. So yeah, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Los Angeles receiving core is going to be both must-start options, as they are typical weeks, but they could be like wide receiver ones against that weak Seattle defense for sure.
Did you recap your picks from last week already?
Oh yeah, sure, I can jump into that. So David Johnson, I thought he was gonna have a really good week, and he got injured unfortunately. But I also had Juju, who was really really good. I think he had 23 full PPR points against Dallas. I bought low on him, and I'm very happy that I bought low on him when he was really bad there in like early mid-October. But if you bought low like I did, he's paying off, and he's being that solid wide receiver too that he was headed into the fantasy season. So hopefully he kind of keeps that up. But yeah, I was really really proud of that pick because I like Juju a lot. So
yeah, that was a good pick, man.
I'll jump into my second fantasy pick for this week, though, and it's going to be it's a guy that we talked about. I know, Chris, you were really high on him a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to pick him here. It's Travis Fulgham. He was my backup against the Giants. He had a big game a couple weeks ago against the Giants on Thursday Night Football. The Giants are currently the 23rd team against fantasy wide receivers. That's hard to say. So yeah, I think it's a little worrisome there with Fulgham because Sanders is obviously coming back. Dallas Goedert's probably going to attract some more targets, but I still like Fulgham. I think he's got a good repertoire with Wentz. I still think he's going to see a lot of action against at least against fantasy receivers against the weak New York defense. So yeah.
Yeah, just like the last time these two teams played, I think most of these players are startable. I think, depending on what your situation looks like, you can definitely start them. And I think Fulgham is one of those guys. As well as obviously Sanders, who is coming back.
Oh yeah, I lock up Fulgham as a wide receiver too for the rest of the season, man. I really like him. I mean, Jeffrey's taken a really long time to come back. Who knows if he's actually back from the injury? I think Miles Sanders really only opens this offense even more for Travis Fulgham. It takes a little bit less. Teams are going to be keying in on Miles Sanders. He's the best player in this offense, but Fulgham has been their best receiver, no doubt about it. And they also do have the return of rookie Jalen Reagor. So, I mean, I don't think that's I think, honestly, this helps Fulgham because he's not going to be seeing quite as much attention. I don't think this actually hurts him. I think he is their clear number one receiver right now and a guy that I'm very willing to play matchup, regardless of matchup.
Yeah. He's really emerged as a top receiver in the league, which is unfortunate for Lions fans since we had him not too long ago. But anyway, Chris, how about you jump into your second fantasy pick?
I'll let Roman go ahead.
Oh yeah, Chris, you let us off. Sorry,
yeah.
Roman, you go.
I stole everybody's picks. So.
All right, I guess I'll go. We don't usually pick quarterbacks, but I think I'm going to take a shot on one today. We picked against them, his team to win this week. But I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. Continually week in, week out, getting points. I think he's almost getting to the point of a must start every week. But if we didn't say that already, Herbert definitely a must start this week at least. Because he's going to have the points. I think it'll be a high scoring game, and you're going to want him in your lineup.
See, I actually think this could be one of his worst games of the year out of all of his games. I think Miami's defense is really good. I mean, maybe I'm just completely wrong because he has just been ridiculous. But I think there's a chance that the shoe falls in this game. I think Miami's defense has the recipe to force a couple turnovers, maybe get some pressure on him as well. I mean, I'm sure he'll still have a fine fantasy game, but I think he could have one of his worst fantasy games, maybe around 20 points, which would be kind of disappointing. If you're making him your start of the week, you're calling for probably 25, 30 points from him. I mean, 20 points, that's not a start of the week, personally. I don't think, because 20 points is like QB 15 this year. So I think you're calling for 25, 30 points if you're making him start of the week. I don't think he gets there, but it's an interesting pick for sure. And I would still be very willing to start him, and I think he's a weekly must start.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a chalky pick, in my opinion, just because Herbert's been really, really good ever since he kind of, at least in terms of fantasy and in real life, in all honesty, since he got the starting job against Kansas City a few weeks ago. But at the same time, I do kind of see where Chris is coming from, where Miami is a good defense. So it's not entirely a chalk pick. So I see kind of maybe the risk there, but I still think he's going to get you 20 points. He's a bona fide QB1 in my opinion. You can just kind of put him there in your starting lineup and forget about it. He's really emerges at in terms of fantasy. So yeah, I mean, I could see either outcome. He could just go off for 32 points, or he could also just get like 20, which is still pretty average, pretty good for your fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if he has that high upside game, which is very possible, I think you'll be very happy with that. If he has like 20 points, though, I think that would be for making him your start of the week. I think that would be a little bit disappointing. But I'll go ahead and jump into my last pick. This isn't going to be my pick right here, but I just want to bring some light. I think Nick Chubb is going to have a monster week this week. I think it's too chalk to pick as my start of the week, but I think he's going to have a ridiculously good week. Coming off the injury, I think he gets in the end zone twice. Runs for over 100 yards. That's my prediction. I think he gets over 24 points this week. I think he goes absolutely ham. But I'm going to go with the pick that Roma made last week. Not both of them, but I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks in this one against Cleveland. I think Cleveland's pass defense is horrendous. I think the attention is going to be on Will Fuller. Cooks has had 4 straight games with either 60 yards or a touchdown. I think he continues that streak this week with either 60 yards or a touchdown. I think he can go over the 100-yard mark. I think that's a potential. I also think he has a very good potential to score a touchdown in this one. I think could be a high-scoring game because both defenses kind of stink. I like Brandon Cooks. Also, I like Will Fuller, too, but I'm not going to pick them both. So I already did that with Gibson and McKissick, which I believe in both of them as well. I think Cooks is a very safe wide receiver 2 pick for this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know Fuller is kind of a must start. Usually, normally every week, if you have him, you play him, whether it's a wide receiver 2 or a flex. But taking your shot on Cooks is a good pick. I think he was pretty fortunate to get that long touchdown last week, considering it was a screen and he took it all the way himself. That was a nice play by him. He's definitely in line for more work, and same with Fuller. They're both going to get their opportunities. They both could potentially score, but it's going to be a win for the Houston Texans.
All right, I won't go that far, but I did have Fuller. He was my backup to my backup behind Fulgham, so I'm in agreement with you there, Chris. I think both Fuller, as Roman predicted last week, I think Fuller and Cooks are both going to be having some really nice games against Cleveland. And if they gets them the win, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I think that's it for fantasy faves and for the whole pick'em for this week. Any final thoughts anybody wants to add?
No, this is going to be a fun week of picks. We got some alternating picks. We made it interesting. I'm excited to see if Drew calls his shot right on either Cincinnati or LA. But I'm also very excited to see if I just start the week off with an absolutely disastrous Indianapolis of Washington loss, which is very possible.
Yeah, Thursday night usually sets the tone of what the picks are going to look like, so we'll know as soon as Thursday what the standings could potentially look like for the next week.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure. It's going to be outside of our very, very important pick'em. It's Thursday night's game is going to have some real big NFL real life implications as well. So
agreed.
It's fun to watch that game. But again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and you can also search us on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to drop a comment down below. We love hearing from all of our listeners. Let us know if you are still a big believer in Houston's playoff chances like Roman is, or if or if you're a Rams hater like Chris, or if you're a Bengals believer like me. I don't know. I'm not really a Bengals believer, but I think they're going to win this week. But drop a comment down below with your picks, your fantasy picks of the week, and all that great stuff. As I said, we love reading. We love responding to them. Yeah, thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
See ya.